I did the Grazing Matcher course in the season 17-18 and I got very good benefit from it. I've challenged myself to try and make better quality hay and silage at the start of it. I'd had results up till then or in prior years, and my results are okay, but they're best described as average, I suppose, just sort of industry average. But after going through the course and putting some strategies into place that I learnt on the course, we lifted the quality of the hay and silage to a very high grade, and that certainly more than paid for the course itself. The time of cutting is critical, and I was never able to cut early enough because I never had surplus pasture early enough in the growing season. So we had to look at our grazing strategies and our management right from the autumn through winter and then into spring. So yeah, more strategic grazing strategies, more strategic fertiliser application, and more, and then being able to generate that surplus earlier to set it aside for silage. And then of course I was getting very good regrowth in the silage paddocks as well, so I don't think there was any loss in production from having done that. It was a better quality and there was more of it.
I think the primary change that we think of is moving to rotational grazing. We started our block with 2 paddocks. It's a small block, but we've split it into, I think we've got 10 paddocks now and on our way to 12, hopefully in the next 12 months. And that just allows us to manage the pasture ever so better and gives us operational flexibility, just much better, as well as all the better grass growth you get from rotational grazing. You know, certainly understanding the management of ryegrass, the residuals, the point at which you return cattle into that paddock ideally, and then, you know, obviously recognising there's a theory and then there's a practice and there's a compromise between those two. You're actually checking your paddocks much more frequently because you're almost going out on a daily basis just to check where you are at in the cycle and what's ahead of you. And so it's made us far more focused on what's happening to the grass and how to best grow it.
Well, rotational grazing, I say, is the main thing. Yeah, we did a trial on 11 paddocks. Yeah, it allowed us to free up a bit more in the way of paddocks for hay. It's been good for pasture utilisation. It reduced the wastage and I think it was good for worm management as well. You get a much more even graze, and they ate everything rather than choosing what to eat and what to leave. So we've just done a 1-wire electric, didn't worry about an earth. I was a little bit concerned about the small paddock size, having a lot of little 4-hectare paddocks, but we set it up so that the length of the paddock, when we dropped the wires, we could just run it as a single paddock again for fertilising and that sort of thing.
The biggest change that we've made on farm is to do with the residual pasture left over after each grazing. So previously we were grazing too far to the ground, which was taking too much sugars and reserves out of the plant and affecting the recovery of the pasture after grazing. So our major change is to really leave that 5 centimetres of pasture after grazing. It has had some negative impacts on weed management. I think, you know, grazing down hard allows better weed control, so we've had to come up with other ways of managing those weeds through, you know, chemicals and reseeding a bit. But the overall benefits in terms of productivity from that, getting the grazing height right and getting the pastures to recover quickly, we've definitely seen big responses in productivity from that.
The biggest beneficial changes we've made is to a longer deferment before grazing period and allowing those roots to go down properly. And the other one is not grazing below the 50 millimetres and allowing that plant to recover more strongly than it has done in the past. We've certainly grown more grass during the season, and that's a visible thing. And so we know when we can see visible changes, we must be growing at least 15% more, so we'll say that as a minimum base.
Yeah, out of the Grazing Matcher group, what we've done in the second year is we've really concentrated on our feed budgeting from summer through to autumn, and we've brought in extra feed where we needed to, which was particularly important this year with the late break to the season. That's allowed us to defer longer, and traditionally we would have started grazing on the 15th of May. This year, because of the late break, we didn't graze till the 15th of June. but we have actually ended up with more grass because we've deferred and didn't start grazing as early. And we've matched that then with a better round of fertiliser testing, both soil and leaf sampling, and the judicious use of particularly nitrogen on top of our basal, lime and phosphorus, and that's really both affected our live weights at the end of the season and our hay production as we've gone through, and it's been really successful. It's been very expensive. We've mostly spent well over $500 a hectare on the pastures, on the hay paddocks this year, but we've more than paid for it with the increased fodder value.